When it comes to living the good life, it's more than just a series of habits that you have to take on. When it comes to living the good life, what you have to do is you have to completely change the person you are. You have to change the way you see life, the way you behave, the way you wake up every single day, the thoughts that you have, and everything involved with your philosophy, your behaviors, the way you present yourself, the way you carry yourself, the energy you have in the world, and every other thing that is also involved in creating your personality. This is why I don't teach about simple tricks, tips, or little habits that you can use to get the quick route to success. We talk about deep level identity change, where you guys can become the sort of person you've always known you can be. I have a newsletter called The Next Chapter, where we essentially help you guys with frameworks, mindsets, steps, and other sort of things that you need to do in order to build the life that you want to build. Click the link in the bio, subscribe, it's free. We send you newsletters every single week to help you guys start living the life that you actually want to live. Click the link below, let's go. Now, typically our biggest problem when it comes to chasing our dreams is we typically build the foundation off of a rocky start. There's usually 3 questions that we take into consideration when you're going down the path that you want to go, and you definitely want to ask these questions, but typically these questions, when contemplated and answered too quickly, lead you down the wrong path. First question is the thing I want to do going to be able to make me enough money to sustain a living? When you're considering money in the equation and only money, the problem with that is that you're typically going to choose something that doesn't resonate with you, your personality, your voice, your values, your morals, and your strengths. You don't consider your weaknesses, you're just thinking, will it put food on the table? And yes, you do need food on the table to survive, but when you're going from strictly a point of money, it's not going to lead you down somewhere very far. The next question people ask is this thing realistic? So what we typically do is we look at the people around us, the success stories we've heard around us, and we think, okay, if so-and-so has done this, then I should probably do that because at least I can put food on the table with this, or at least this is something that I know for a fact can be achieved because I've got multiple people I've seen that's happened to achieve this. The other question we ask is, will this be respected by the people around us? So, of course, human beings were naturally tribal. We do seek the validation of other people around us before we pursue something. It's very, very rare that you find somebody with the sort of personality where they will go for something they want to pursue with no consideration of what other people would think of them. And yes, of course, you don't want to do something that's going to ruin your reputation because your reputation is like gold. You got the wrong reputation, that's going to come to bite you years down the line. And trust me, in a world with the internet, CCTV surveillance pretty much everywhere, you really want to build yourself on a strong foundation. The right way in which you pick your life's purpose is there's a series of questions you need to ask before you come to that conclusion. You need to look at your background and the things that resonate with you. Not just the things that resonate with you now, but I would even challenge you to look back into your childhood. What were the subjects you used to study in school that you really liked? What were some of the books, the things that interested you? Why did they interest you? What was it about it? What caused that curiosity, or what made you sort of go down that path? And I'm not talking about things like video games or the toys you used to play with. No, we're talking about deeper questions, right? We're talking about what were the things you could talk about on and on and on with nobody sort of stopping you. What are the things that you could look up for hours without people sort of interrupting you, and you could just focus down on these things? You need to look at things that were practical. You know, for example, with me, English, I used to love creative writing. Storytelling was one of my biggest strengths during preschool, primary school days. So storytelling has always been something that I can see a pattern of it being consistent in my life growing up. You also need to look at your personality. Not every single person is an extrovert. Some people are introverts. Some people are a mixture of both. Some people are necessarily more quirky than others. Some people have sort of, really, really detailed personality where they look into every little detail of everything. Some people are more laid back like myself. You need to look into that. You need to look at your voice, your story, your background. What is it about your ethnicity? Where do your family come from? What's your heritage? And you need to consider all these things. The reason most people don't actually know what they want to do is they've never actually done the simple thing you need to do in order to find out the answer, and that's sit down and actually contemplate on where you want to take your life. See, me, when I did an exercise of sort of breaking down my favorite values and the things that I really have seen consistently show up in my life that I've typically been curious about, enjoyed and valued my whole entire life, I found out that the number one value that I've got in my life is creativity. This goes back to the days, like I said, of preschool, primary school, where I loved creative writing. It was always something that I was passionate about, when you can tell a story. And that's partially because I wanted to escape the reality I lived in. You know, being a kid, I was a shy kid. I wasn't an extroverted kid. I felt isolated. You might have felt the same yourself. Always felt that you were different to the pack around you. Felt like you stood out. You had different thoughts and beliefs. You weren't the typical kid. You didn't necessarily always watch sports like them. You didn't necessarily always talk about the same things. You had little things that you enjoyed watching that they didn't do. And creativity allowed me to express that without being judged, because essentially I was just writing and the only person marking it was my teacher. You know, my friends weren't looking at it, and I used to tell stories all the time. Growing up, my favorite rapper was Kanye West. And at the time when I discovered his music was back in 2005. I believe I was 9 or 10 because I was in year 4, year 5 in the UK. I'm not sure what that would be in America, but essentially what would happen is my sister used to have a Walkman. A Walkman was like this big round CD carrier where you would put a CD in, you put headphones in, and literally this thing was huge. You couldn't put this in your pocket. It's not like days of a phone now or an iPod or all these other devices. You basically would listen to it most likely in your house. You wouldn't really carry it around. Some people did, but I was too small to carry that thing around. And I would listen to this because I wasn't necessarily interested in watching TV, cartoons and things like that. And she had a mixture, a playlist as we call it now, and it always had different sort of songs. I remember I used to listen to certain songs by Black Eyed Peas, Lauryn Hill. She had a lot of, Nas, hip hop on there, early sort of 50 Cent, Jay-Z, Kanye West, all the sort of known names that we know now today, Janet Jackson, Michael Jackson, Mary J. Blige, things like that. And at the time as a kid, I didn't actually know who I was listening to. I just would pick the music based off of, did it make me feel good? Did I like it? And the songs that I really liked, I would constantly play on repeat. You guys probably do the same thing, right? When you like a song, we have this thing where we have to keep playing it over and over again. And I remember I would listen to songs like Jesus Walks. At the time, Late Registration had come out, so I would hear things like Diamonds Are Forever. I would also hear, New Workout Plan, Through the Wire. He had so many songs at the time, Kanye West, I could go on and on and on. But the point is, I never knew this was Kanye West at the time. And at the time, hip hop was there was a one shoe fits all when it came into the music. People who were successful in the music industry in the early 2000s, these were the gangster rappers. The, very hyper masculine characters that came out. This was the era of 50 Cent just about coming out, the controversial rappers like Eminem who would say things that were outlandish. There wasn't really too much of a fan base for conscious rap. Yes, it was popular, but remember when hip hop sort of started to skyrocket the charts, Tupac, Biggie Smalls, NWA, Dr. Dre, all of these characters were the people that everybody seemed to know. And that's because hip hop was so controversial. It had no censorship. It was just pure expression, the good, the bad, the ugly, and people really resonate with that because it felt real. And something I always say to people is when it comes to relating to people, realness is always the best strategy. Fakeness is always a rocky foundation to build your content off of. Now, as the years sort of went by, eventually my sister would always get angry when I'm taking her Walkman, and she used to take her Walkman back, but I would ask her about the songs I'm listening to. And when I would watch MTV with her, I started to hear the songs that I was listening to on her Walkman. Eventually it was an MP3 she would have, which was more portable. And we would see these songs on the TV, so there was a music video. And when there's a music video, I could now see who was the artist that was making these songs. And that's when I would see a consistent theme with Kanye West. And I said, okay, that's who this artist is. It's Kanye West. He's sort of this different guy to the other rappers that I was seeing at the time. Like I said, Kanye West didn't come into the industry as sort of a gangster. His first album is called College Dropout, which, is very controversial in my community, in my culture, especially in blacks. We're very much raised up in learning that education is everything. If you don't have an education, you're not going to be anything in life. This goes back to my heritage in Africa, sort of how my grandmother raised my mom and how her mother raised her, etc., etc. And Kanye West dressed a bit different. He's mentioned it in multiple interviews. He had the pink polo, and When I used to see him, this sort of resonated with me because I always felt like I was the person who stood out. I had a different fashion sense. I went to a predominantly white school. When you're the black kid, you know, your culture's different. The things you eat at home, the African dishes, these guys don't eat that. You know, they had things like pets in their house. My mom was working multiple jobs. I didn't really spend time with my mother. You know, everything about my background was different. And Kanye West also represented this. He was sort of the icon for people who felt different. He sort of came into this industry with confidence. He didn't care what people thought of him. And he said, this is who I am, unapologetically, and stood by that. And his music was different to all the other music. Making songs like Jesus Walks, where my mom would take us to church, you know, I thought rappers make songs like Christian songs. Like, I always used to think Christian songs were corny, I'll be honest with you, as a kid. Most kids, if they're honest, they will say the same thing, right? And what Kanye West had was that creativity. He always was different to the pack and he always stood out. And because he stood out, his fan base was so much stronger. I remember when he had the back-to-back with 50 Cent later on down the line, that he ended up outselling 50 Cent on the Graduation album, and 50 Cent, I believe, had Curtis at the time. And because of Kanye West being a rapper, I wanted to be a rapper myself when I was younger, because there were so many aspects of rap music and being a musician in general that I like. Of course, there's the narcissistic side of you that wants the fame, the ego, the gratification you're gonna get from people, the financial freedom. But really what I liked about it was the self-expression aspect of it. Rap was more than just somebody saying words on a microphone. These guys were truly speaking about how they felt. They didn't have limitations on what they can say. They didn't have to fit into one box. They could get onto a song and they could say exactly how they feel. And through this, they would build an audience. Imagine being paid to be yourself. That's the ultimate dream in the world. Just waking up every single day and you're paid for who you are and not paid for the mask that you're putting on and the persona you're putting on. And this was something that truly resonated with me. It goes back to my childhood values such as storytelling. This is an example. When you guys look back into your childhood, you need to look at the music you even listened to. What did you like about that artist? What about their fashion sense? How do you dress now? What did you dress like back then? What's the consistent theme that you're seeing in your life? And this is how you pick your life's purpose. If you don't do that, then like I said, you're going to pick something that you're not going to be motivated by, and you're going to eventually quit. See, most people believe that money is enough to motivate you. And this is why we got things like being realistic. Is it respectable? Is it something that can put food on the table? This is why we consider all these things. And I get it. We need to feed our family. We need to feed ourselves. But let me ask you this, right? At the job that you're currently doing, or the career, if you're working, if your workplace was to offer you 30 more hours a week, would you do that? And some of you are going to say no. Some of you are going to say yes. But even if you do say yes, what will be the reason to take on those hours? You would realize it's not necessarily because you love what you're doing or you're enjoying it. It's because you need to basically buy certain things later on down the line. Maybe you want to go on a holiday. Maybe you need a bigger house. Maybe you're saving up for something that you've been working to get for a very long time. But typically what you'll find is that all these things have one thing in common. Is they're purpose driven. Even something as small as going on a holiday, there's a reason you want to go on that holiday. It taps into that inner child of yours that had that curiosity to travel. Something like buying a bigger home, you know, there's a vision you've got in your head of what that home will make you feel like, the emotions it's going to bring up. And I know a lot of content creation nowadays sort of dismisses that, and I do understand there is a space for hustle culture. We do need to do things through discipline as well. But at the end of the day, if you're similar to myself, you're going to understand that if you pick a path that's simply driven by money and a realistic sort of point of view, eventually you lose the passion and eventually you're just going to stop. Then you're going to be back to square one where you're essentially lost. It's better to actually take the time to step back, contemplate, and then move forward. So as the years went by, eventually I came across social media. Social media has been around for quite a while now, sort of since I was a lot younger, but it really sort of started to be something that I watched around the age of 15, 16. These are the times when people were making Vines. If you remember Vines, there were a lot of prank videos. This was like the early TikTok. For those of you who remember, YouTube was a big thing then, like people were just making videos of themselves, getting on the camera and presenting themselves. And when the internet came into action, I basically considered many different paths that I could go down. At the time, there was things like crypto that eventually came into play. There was things like internet marketing. I remember the early days. There was things like being a YouTuber. Being a YouTuber was sort of fascinating to me, but the content that I used to watch at 15, 16, I used to watch, the prank videos, a lot of dating stuff on like going out, trying to talk to girls, things that fascinate you as a boy. Games. I used to watch walkthroughs for a lot of games, the Gears of Wars, the Call of Duties, picturing me playing the game that I actually want to get, which my mom can't afford for me, and this was something that I considered. Maybe I should create a gaming channel because, I like to play games. This is what I was thinking at the time, but I never really had a passion for it. But when I started to see rappers going onto YouTube, I thought, okay, this is something that I can do. I can make music and I can sort of begin to funnel it through the internet. Now, one of the things that eventually made me stop pursuing trying to be a musician online or trying to be a rapper online or, creating a fan base was I started to look at the limitations that I did have in front of me with being a musician. Some of you guys know when it comes to being a musician, there's a lot of investment financially you have to do up front before you ever see a return on investment. You might have to do this for a decade, put in thousands and thousands and thousands into it. This is why musicians typically rely on record labels in order to help them launch their career, because they have a much bigger budget to pick from. And I know there's the argument that, of course, you can buy your own studio equipment and you can upload the videos yourselves and begin to build a fan base if you're truly serious. But you gotta remember, when I was pursuing music, that this wasn't the common factor. This wasn't something that you constantly used to see people do. You didn't go around seeing people say, hey, I made my money off of being independent. Being independent wasn't really, mainstream back then. It is now, of course. So if you wanted to pursue it and you're a lot younger, you might want to do that if you truly believe that's your life's purpose. But what made me stop is the investments I had to put into music videos, I had to put into recording, all this money. So what happens is, if you don't have the money to go into the studio, you can't record. So therefore, you're not actually practicing. You don't get the experience of constantly repeating this process so you can actually master it. Music videos was something I really enjoyed doing because I was a creative person, like I said. A lot of the times when you make a song, you also have a vision in which you see that you want the audience to also see, to fit the theme that you've created in the song. As time began to progress, what I realized is I needed something that didn't need me to invest too much financially because of the situation I was in. I wasn't able to access a lot of capital. I needed something that there was no gatekeepers. There isn't no record labels. I could literally just begin building a profit from the jump by myself, in my house, doing my day-to-day life. I needed something that allowed me to be truly myself. I didn't want to be putting on a mask. I didn't want to pretend to be an expert, really putting on the clothes to look a certain way in order to get people to listen. I needed something that truly would accept me for my voice, my story, my background, and everything else that comes with my personality. So eventually I sort of started to explore the idea of using social media. And there's many ways in which you can make money on social media. There's things like being a TikTok affiliate, doing the dances, eventually getting sponsorships. You can be a fitness coach online, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, and you essentially sell your programs. There's high ticket sales. I had a sales background, so I thought, okay, you essentially find someone with a product or service already successful. You just have to basically learn about that product or service and you can generate hundreds of thousands, which is actually true. And all of these are definitely lucrative markets and you can definitely make money in them. But like I said, they didn't have that punch that made me want to actually pursue it. It didn't resonate with me deeply. And because they didn't resonate with me deeply, whenever I would start one of them, I would end up stopping once I lost momentum and forgetting about them and jumping on to the next thing. See, in my 20s, what I did is I jumped from one thing to another. And what you might find when discovering your life's purpose is that it's not overnight. You're going to have to work on it consistently over a long period of time. And you're going to try many different things and you're going to learn about many different things about yourself the things you like about your purpose, the things you don't like, and eventually you're gonna come to the conclusion of what you want to do. But what I really liked about being a musician was the personal brand aspect. These guys didn't need to be anyone else but themselves. They had full creative freedom to express themselves. And what I realized is that building a personal brand is an avenue that also allows the same thing. See, when you build a personal brand, you essentially just have to pick a lane, an expertise, a niche. You get on camera, you begin speaking about it. You don't need to dress a certain way. There's many people blowing up on social media by just being themselves. The good, the bad, the ugly, the funny, the quirky, the weird, the emotional side of them. Everything sort of contributes to your personal brand, and people who really resonate with you are going to find you and they're going to begin follow, liking, comment, subscribing. Actually you build a fan base off of this, similar to how a musician builds a fan base from expressing himself through his music. Now, saying the word personal brand is too broad for a lot of people. The biggest question that you typically hear on the internet is, well, what niche am I going to go into? Well, I believe first of all, you have to pick a subject that you're going to talk about. And then you have to build your personal brand on the foundation of personal improvement. And I'm not just talking about things like going to the gym. Yes, that's important. But I'm talking about actually working on your emotional impulses, working on your discipline, working on your consistency, working on your ability to film, edit, speak, communicate. There's so many things you can develop when you're going down the route of building a personal brand. And when it comes to your niche, simply like I said, you pick something you want to speak about. Look at other creators that you watch already. What other creators you follow? What do they speak about? You could do the same thing. Not every single person has to talk about something that's going to improve people's lives. Maybe you just want to do entertainment. Maybe you're a female, you're watching this video and you just want to dress up in different outfits, you know, the Fashion Nova route, and sort of do that. There's money to be made at the end of the day. For me, like I said, what's important to me is to pick something that I can do for decades or more. So I decided self-improvement is something that I want to speak about, but also building a personal brand itself. I wanted to build it in real time, whilst also helping you guys build it in real time as well. And then eventually I could, of course, venture into many other products and services that I want to do. In order to build a personal brand with the foundation of self-improvement, I'm going to give you guys an example of how you can do this. So let's say you're creating a channel and you want to talk about fashion, right? Fashion's easy because there's many routes you can go down. You can be the person designing the clothes. You can be the person simply speaking about the clothes. You can be the person wearing the clothes, the model himself, right? When I say grounded in self-improvement, first of all, what you got to understand is there's so many aspects of fashion that you can begin to learn as you're also building your personal brand. You could actually, if you're not designing already, you could start learning about design. Maybe that involves you building up your skill of being a graphic designer, actually creating designs. Talking about your inspiration, the interests you have. Bring in your strengths, your weaknesses, your background, your ethnicity, your voice, your story, everything that I was mentioning earlier, and you essentially use that to build the brand that you're building. As you begin to speak on this subject and you become more of an expert, you're going to attract the people who are interested in fashion. They're going to eventually see you as a leader. They're going to relate to you for whatever reason. Maybe it's your background, maybe it's your voice, maybe it's just the way you look, maybe it's what you're speaking about specifically. And for whatever reason, they're going to start following you and you're going to build a fan base. And eventually, when you want to monetize, you can begin to think of what you're going to sell to them. Maybe they want, out of the designs you've been displaying on your YouTube channel, people actually want to buy some of those. Maybe they want you to teach them how to design clothes because maybe they can't afford to go into higher education and afford the tens of thousands of pounds or dollars that they need to spend in order to get into higher education. And you can create something that's more affordable and is also detailed enough to move them from A to B. There's so many routes you can do with a personal brand, and like I said, there's no gatekeepers. I'm recording this off of my iPhone 15 Pro Max. There's many new iPhones, but I think I'm going to use this one for a while. I've got a little cheap tripod that I got for £20, sat on my chair, white background, white backdrop, and you just start speaking to a camera. And each time that you upload, you're also building muscles such as discipline, consistency, your ability to speak on camera, coming up with subjects on the fly. You know, I'm rarely looking down. Yes, I look down at my notes to maybe pick up where I'm going with this sort of video, but typically once I've looked down for about a few seconds, I look back up and we're literally back into speaking and just letting whatever's on my mind flow out. Sometimes it's sloppy, sometimes it isn't perfect. I ain't the best speaker yet, I'm still early in my videos. But when you build a personal brand, similar to how when an artist starts his journey, people follow him because he's authentic, they can relate to him because he comes from a similar background to them. You're going to find your audience. The way the algorithm is set up, yes, people always think the algorithm is against them, but as you begin to get better at creating content, the right person will click. They'll stay on the video. The algorithm will learn about you, what people relate to you. You'll start sharing it to those people, a bit of a larger crowd. And as you build and build and build, it's not going to be overnight, but over a long period of time, you're going to have something that you've actually built that's built on a solid foundation that I've been telling you guys about. It's also from your name. No one can be you. No AI can create Tino. No AI can create whoever you are, Luke, Smith, Courtney, whatever. You are yourself. Your interests are yours. Your background is yours. Your story is unique to yours. What you need to learn is how to actually look at your life and present it in a way that other people would want to actually listen. So this is what I mean about looking at your life's purpose. I've told you about my background in hip hop. Listening to it, trying to be it, what I liked about it, actually taking the time to sit down, contemplate, and figure out what is it about that particular path that I liked. And this is how you find your life's purpose. You need to find something that resonates with you. See, purpose isn't found, it's built. In order to build it, you gotta start with yourself. Once you can relate to yourself, the journey becomes a lot easier. I hope you guys have liked this. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'm out. See you next time.